Welcome back to another UCL Fantasy video, this time out of Matchday 7, and this will be the team selection video where I discuss my transfer plans. And remember, we do have unlimited transfers for the knockout stages heading into Matchday 7. I'll also discuss how I did in Matchday 6 with a brief review and talk about the best options for the knockout stages. On screen you can see the UCL Fantasy League. Be sure to join. There is a link in the description below. We have over 3,000 members, making it one of the biggest UCL Fantasy Leagues in the world, and you can see the current top 7 on screen as well. And also be sure to join me on Discord, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and much more. All the links are in the description below. Without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. Matchday 6 wasn't a particularly high-scoring week for me, but it was enough to get a green arrow from roughly 6,900 in the world to 4,029. Ramiro kept a clean sheet away to Inter Milan, which meant Real Sociedad topped the group, and they've been very impressive defensively in the Champions League and in recent games in La Liga. Meanwhile, Joao Cancelo is the complete opposite because Barcelona have been leaking chance after chance, and they're conceding so many goals. They're struggling to win matches, and he came on for a 1-pointer in Matchday 6 against Antwerp, as Barcelona lost that game. And I think going into Matchday 7 against Napoli, despite Napoli having a poor season, sitting roughly 7th in Serie A, I don't think Barcelona are looking particularly great. And are they even going to keep a clean sheet across those two games? I'm not entirely sure about that. Meanwhile, Saliba started against PSV Eindhoven. It was a dead rubber game because Arsenal were going to finish top no matter what the result was, and it ended up being a 1-1 draw, and Saliba was taken off around 60 minutes. It was a rotated side for Arsenal, but Gabriel and Saliba were two of the unaffected players who start every single game pretty much, and they also started in that Champions League game. Meanwhile, Rico Lewis has started most games for Man City in the Champions League, but I would expect that to change going into the knockout stages, especially now that Man City have everyone available. But Man City conceded twice to Svernes Vesada, and Rico Lewis was unable to get any attacking returns, so as a result, he was also quite disappointing. Kvaratskhelia got a ball recovery point and a clean sheet point, but he was a pretty poor transfer on my part. But as for Galeno, I bought him in specifically for Matchday 6, and he just loves playing against Shakhtar Donetsk. He got 2 goals and 2 assists and 22 points overall. That was a difference maker. Without Galeno, I would have got a red arrow, so Galeno is pretty much to thank for that. And most of his points have come against Shakhtar Donetsk, and he's the highest scoring UCL fantasy player in the game. And of course, will that last really? Probably not. But for those that had him for Matchday 1 and or 6, you probably would have benefited a lot from that decision. Next up is Bellingham, who picked up a yellow card and an assist in that win for Real Madrid. But Bellingham is a bit of a yellow card magnet. That's my only concern with him. But he is a jack of all trades, and Bellingham for me is the best option in the game, and he's only behind Galeno in terms of UCL fantasy points. Next up is Zaire Emery, who got 11 points. He scored and got the Player of the Match award away from home against Borussia Dortmund, but I captained Mbappe instead, and that was a big fatal error. Then again, who would I have captained? Maybe Galeno, and gone a bit different. That would have been absolutely marvellous, and it would have probably propelled me into the top 1k if anything. But in the end, Mbappe was a decent captaincy decision, but this season he has been limited to 6 points at best, and he has blanked in 3 out of the 6 games. But it was the group of death. Let's see how he does against Real Sociedad, but I think PSG could struggle a little bit more than most of us would expect. As for Morata, he was off the bench, so he was another one who was subject to Matchday 6 rotation. That was a bit frustrating, but Morata, over the course of the group stages, was very impressive, and he also is capable of some double-digit returns, especially in home matches. As for Harry Kane, he got an assist away from home against Man United, and that was the only goal of the game. But Harry Kane has been so consistent. He might not be the flashiest, and he doesn't get many double-digit hauls, but he's just quite steady, gets you 6 to 9 points in most match days, and for me, that's enough, even at 10.1 million in terms of his price tag. As for my bench, ter Stegen was injured, same with Patrick. David Raum was pretty much rested. And as for Phil Foden, he only played 45 minutes against Svernes Vesada. So overall, 63 points. I've got 440 points, which is actually less than I had at this stage last season. But my rank is high, which goes to show this is a bit of a lower scoring UCL fantasy season up until this point. Let's see if that changes in the knockout stages. But speaking of which, let's now build my team for Matchday 7, and remember, we have unlimited transfers, so the possibilities are endless. I cover all the rules in the How to Play UCL Fantasy video. Be sure to check that out. you get an extra 5 million in the knockout stages. So if you start at 100 million, you now have 105 million to spend on your 15-man squad. But in my case, I've got roughly 107.6 million because I built quite a lot of value and got in on some of the best options quite early, and their prices have gone up as a result. So I've got a bit more to spend than maybe some of you watching will. And my general recommendation is to go for your own picks, back your gut, don't copy what other people are doing. I think that's the best way to enjoy the game and to become a better UCL fantasy player. But let's start off this team with the goalkeepers, the least interesting position, but it's still important. And ideally, you would have 2 picks in this position, which will go far in the knockout stages. So you don't need to make transfers and you can focus instead on the outfield positions. To kick things off, I'm going for Ederson in goal, and he might not make many saves. He only made 4 in the Champions League group stages, but what you get is a good chance of a clean sheet. And also, if you look at the fixtures, Man City against Copenhagen is probably one of the most one-sided on paper, and many of us would expect Man City to progress very far into this competition, at least to the semi-finals. Of course, it does depend on the draw, and you never know what can happen in knockout football. But Ederson, for me, is always a good UCL fantasy option, and I'd rather own him in this fantasy format compared to another one, such as FPL. Man City have won 9 games in a row across all competitions, including 5 in the Premier League, and they've only conceded 5 goals in the last 9 matches, keeping 5 clean sheets in the process, and they're 2 points off Liverpool in the Premier League with a game in hand. And let's see how they do against Everton tomorrow on Saturday in the early kickoff. And Ederson is priced at 6 million. He's owned by 20% of the game. Only 1 clean sheet out of 4 Champions League matches and 13 UCL fantasy points, 3 goals conceded, and as I said, 4 saves as well. Nothing particularly great, but the next goalkeeper has been far more impressive in terms of value, saves, and much more. And he is the most owned goalkeeper in the game, and that is Jan Sommer with 29% ownership. And Inter Milan have kept 4 clean sheets in a row, 2 in the Supercoppa Italiana and also 2 in Serie A against Fiorentina and Juventus, which Inter Milan ended up winning, and they're now a few points clear with a game in hand. So they've definitely got a grip on the Serie A league yet again, and they also conceded 10 league goals in 22 matches. But the best thing about Sommer is his price, only 4.5 million, and in the Champions League he kept 3 clean sheets out of 5 matches, 26 UCL fantasy points, 2 goals conceded, and 19 saves. The only downside for me is the fact that he's facing Atletico Madrid, and that's an extremely tough game to call. I would give Inter Milan the slight edge, but it's still very difficult, and it wouldn't surprise any of us if it was Atletico Madrid who ended up advancing to the quarterfinals. Let me know what you think about that draw and also about all the picks in this team, from the goalkeeper all the way to the forwards. But let's now move on to the defenders. Hummels is featured in every single one of my drafts, and yet again, he's in my final team selection, and let's see if he starts on Friday against Freiburg at home. If he does, I'd be very confident that he will start as well in the Champions League in Matchday 7. But PSV away isn't an easy game. PSV are currently 18 wins in, 2 draws, and undefeated in the Eredivisie. That's an even better record than they had last season when they had even better players at their disposal. But Hummels was really impressive in the Champions League group stages with the most ball recoveries of any player and also the most points of any defender. But he has been a bit of an issue recently because he was unavailable due to a virus and he hasn't started a game since his return. But let's see if he starts against Freiburg on Friday, and by the time this video is published we would have found out, and we can keep each other updated in the comment section on that scenario and situation. But he did come as a sub in Dortmund's 3-1 win against Bochum in late January, and he was benched against Heidenheim in a recent 0-0 draw. Dortmund are currently 4th in the Bundesliga table with 26 goals conceded in 20 games. Not particularly great defensive record, but in the Champions League, 3 clean sheets out of 6 matches in the group of death, no more and no less. And like I said, Hummels was very impressive from an individual perspective. I think he's by far the best Borussia Dortmund defender that we have on offer. He got 1 Player of the Match award, only 4 goals conceded, 2 yellow cards, but the ball recoveries 57. I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous. The most of any player, like I said, and he also got 40 UCL fantasy points. So I really like Hummels. He's also a differential at 5% ownership, and he's only priced at 5.1 million, and you'd still expect Borussia Dortmund to progress through to the quarterfinals, despite the fact that PSV could give them a tough test, especially in Matchday 7. Moving on to the second defender though, and it's quite a close call between 2 Man City defenders, but I'm currently going for Gvardiol because I think in the Champions League, the ball recoveries he gets makes him more impressive than Ruben Dias, who was also the other one I was thinking about. Kyle Walker in FPL is probably the best in terms of a minutes perspective and being nailed on, but I also like those that can get ball ball recoveries on a consistent basis. And amongst the Man City defenders, I think Gvardiol is the best in this regard. And as I mentioned, Man City are on a great run. Everyone is available now, so that could lead to some rotation. Gvardiol isn't safe, but I think the way I'd rank it in terms of nailed on players in the Champions League, it'd be Ruben Dias first, Gvardiol potentially second, and maybe Kyle Walker is also up there because this season he has started most games at right back. Of course, if there are any Man City fans or those that watch them week in, week out, if you've got an informed opinion about the most nailed-on Man City defenders in the Champions League, be sure to let me know. But I think it'll be very difficult to predict Man City's starting 11 every single week with their congested fixture schedule. They've got a double game week in FPL coming up very soon, and they've got the Champions League and the FA Cup. So it'll be very difficult to predict Man City from this point onwards, so long as everyone is fit and available. With Gvardiol, the best thing about him is the lack of yellow cards, 0 in the Champions League group stages and only 1 in his last 10 games across all competitions. But on the other side, you've also got a lack of goal contribution, 0 goals and 0 assists in his last 10 games. But Gvardiol has started 6 games in a row, and I think he's one of the most nailed-on Man City defenders. He's also priced at 5.5 million, and he's a mega differential with only 6% ownership. And in terms of Champions League clean sheets, only 1 out of 3 appearances, 17 UCL Fantasy points, 21 ball recoveries, 1 assist, 3 goals conceded, and the best stat of them all, 0 yellow cards. So I do like Gvardiol, and I think he's probably the best Man City defender in UCL Fantasy, and in FPL he's probably second, possibly third, just behind Kyle Walker. Next up, this will be very interesting because I'm going for another defensive double up, and it will include Bayern Munich and Upamecano, who was injured, but he's now back in training, and he's also in contention to start against Bayer Leverkusen at the weekend, and he should be available to start in Matchday 7 as a result against Lazio. And Bayern Munich aren't the greatest defensively. They do somehow leak chances and also concede quite a lot of goals. Their Bundesliga record isn't particularly great from a defensive perspective, but their underlying numbers in terms of non-penalty expected goals conceded is the best in the top 5 European leagues, which actually quite surprised me. And that's why maybe 1 or 2 Bayern Munich defenders could be the way to go, because they have some pretty good value in terms of those that get ball recovery points and also the occasional clean sheet. With Upamecano, he came off of an injury before half-time in a 3-1 win over Borussia Mönchengladbach. Eric Dyer came on, he made a goal line clearance and played very well, but Upamecano should still start in Matchday 7 against Lazio. Upamecano is now back in team training, of course. Manuel Neuer is still a bit of a doubt, but you would also expect him to be fit and also in contention against Lazio. So I think if that's also the case, and you've got the likes of Kimmich also returning and Kim Min-jae from the Asian Cup, Bayern Munich are suddenly looking a lot stronger, especially from a defensive perspective. And Bayern Munich are now 2 points behind Leverkusen and face them this weekend, so they could leapfrog them in the Bundesliga table. 19 goals conceded in 20 Bundesliga matches for Bayern Munich. Not a poor record, not particularly great. It's decent, but in terms of the underlying numbers, they probably should have kept a few more clean sheets and conceded fewer goals. But the reason why I've included him right now is because Upamecano is priced at 5 million, his ownership is 5%, and typically he's very good for ball recoveries in recent Champions League seasons, and he's also doing a good job in this campaign. 3 clean sheets out of 5 matches. Upamecano was subbed off early against Galatasaray just before Bayern Munich conceded, so he locked in that clean sheet. He's got 29 UCL Fantasy points, 28 ball recoveries, and 4 goals conceded. And all of this in just a matter of 5 games is very impressive, to say the least. And as I said, I'm going for a double up in the Bayern Munich defence, and it will include Kim Min-jae yet again. And once again, he's priced at 5 million. He's a differential with 7% ownership, and he's now back from the Asian Cup as South Korea lost 2-0 to Jordan. And Kim Min-jae could even start this weekend against Bayer Leverkusen, and if he doesn't, there's still a good chance that he will against Lazio in that crucial game in the Champions League knockout stages. And I really like these two because they're both priced at 5 million, they're ball recovery machines, and in Kim Min-jae's case, he's got the 3rd most ball recoveries of any player in the Champions League so far with 46, and he's also considered 6 goals whilst he was on the pitch for Bayern Munich, and only 1 clean sheet out of 5 matches there for the Bavarians. But overall, Kim Min-jae and Upamecano are the best ways of covering Bayern Munich defensively. Next up would probably be Neuer in goal, and then after that I'd consider Davis, despite his added potential in terms of the attack, and you could also add Guerreiro to that list. But Kim Min-jae and Upamecano will be huge boosts to Bayern Munich, and I think these two could be 2 of the best in terms of value in the heart of the defence. The last defender defender is another one who's featured in every single one of my drafts, and that's going to be Saliba, away to Porto. And one downside you could say is that pretty much all of my players so far, with the exception of Summer, are away from home in the first leg. So you could see a low score in Matchday 7 for me, and then in Matchday 8 the points could rack up. But you would maybe want a bit more of a balance in terms of home and away fixtures, because home advantage can be very crucial, especially for certain teams. But Saliba has kept only 2 clean sheets in the last 8 games, and Arsenal have won 3 games in a row after experiencing a very difficult winless streak in December. They are third in the Premier League table, 2 points behind Liverpool, and Saliba has 3 yellow cards in the last 5 games. And something I really liked about Saliba before is that he went almost a year or even over a year without getting a yellow card, but all of a sudden he's picking up too many for my liking, and that could be a concern going into the Champions League knockout stages. But overall, I still think Saliba will get his composure back, and the hope is that he stops getting booked so frequently. So with this defensive line, including the goalkeepers, we've got 2 defensive double-ups with Ederson and Gvardiol, Kim Min-jae and Upamecano, and the rest cover different teams with Hummels and Dortmund, Saliba and Arsenal, and Sommer and Inter Milan. Let me know if there are any other defenders or goalkeepers that you'd consider instead. With Real Madrid, for example, I backed them to go far in this competition, but in terms of clean sheets against Leipzig, I'm not so sure. In Matchday 7, I would expect Leipzig to score, and even in Matchday 8, potentially at the Santiago Bernabeu. So that is the defensive line. Let's now move on to the midfielders, where things get even more interesting, and there have been some changes from every single draft. Originally, I wanted to go for Joshua Kimmich in the heart of the midfield, but he picked up a shoulder problem, and there were reports they could be out until March, but he's now back. He's been training since Wednesday, the 7th of February, and he's got a great chance of starting against Bayer Leverkusen and also against Lazio in the Champions League, which is most important, of course, in this video. Kimmich has missed several matches due to the shoulder problem, but he's got 1 goal and 3 assists in 13 Bundesliga starts. There are reports that he's been experiencing issues with Thomas Tuchel throughout the season, but he still starts most games for Bayern Munich. He's priced at 6.6 million. His ownership is 20%, and he's got 32 UCL Fantasy points, 2 assists, 2 Player of the Match awards, 2 clean sheets, 34 ball recoveries, and 1 penalty conceded, so he lost a few points there. But Kimmich is very good in terms of assists and Player of the Match awards and even ball recoveries, so I really like Kimmich at that price. I think a similar option is Rodri from Man City, but I'd rather have Kimmich at the moment, assuming that he's fit and available for Matchday 7, and he should be, unless there is a setback, as Thomas Tuchel said. Next up is Phil Foden. He's my favourite Man City midfielder right now. I talked about this in FPL2. He scored a hat-trick against Brentford in the last game, and he also has only 1 blank since game week 17 in the Premier League, and he's got a very good record in recent games, 7 goals and 4 assists in his last 10 games across all competitions, and he's also got quite low ownership at 11%. He's priced at 8.1 million, 38 UCL Fantasy points, 2 double-digit hauls, 3 goals, 2 assists, and 2 Player of the Match awards, just like Kimmich. But next up is a Player of the Match award machine. He can get goals, assists, ball recoveries from time to time, and he is also potentially on penalties. And we're talking about none other than the highest owned player in UCL Fantasy, Jude Bellingham, with 75% ownership. That's only going to increase before the deadline. He also took Real Madrid's last penalty against Almeria in a 3-2 victory. And if he's on penalties as well, that just makes Bellingham the best option in UCL Fantasy by far. And Leipzig is a tough game on paper, but Real Madrid are the favourites, and Bellingham has a history of facing them during his time at Borussia Dortmund. So Bellingham for me is almost essential. My only problem with him is that he picks up far too many yellow cards. 3 bookings in his last 5 matches across all competitions, and at one stage it was 7 out of his last 9, which is quite ridiculous to be honest. But in the Champions League, he's returned in all 5 of his starts, 3 double-digit returns. In terms of UCL Fantasy points, second only behind Galeno, 4 goals, 3 assists, 3 Player of the Match awards, and the only problem with that is 2 bookings as well. But next up is a player who was off form, but he played quite well in the recent game, and that is Zaire Emery. In his last 10 games for PSG, he's got 1 goal, 1 assist, and 1 yellow card, but he picked up an assist in a 3-1 win over Brest in the Coupe de France for Paris Saint-Germain. He has been benched in 2 of the last 4 games, and he has sometimes played as a right back or right wing back. But Zaire Emery in the heart of the midfield for PSG has been a great talent, and in the Champions League he's also picking up the Player of the Match awards with 2 in the group stages. He's also got 1 goal, 3 assists, 2 double-digit hauls, and 35 UCL Fantasy points for a 5.3 million midfielder. That is ridiculous, and his ownership is only 3%, so he's a great differential and a great enabler for your UCL Fantasy squads. But next up is going to be the most expensive midfielder of them all, with the exception of Kevin De Bruyne, and that is Saka. And whilst De Bruyne is a bit tempting, especially against Copenhagen, Saka has been so consistent in the Champions League. He's got the joint most goals and assists alongside Kane and Bellingham, and he's also got the most dribbles in also all competitions. He's got 10 goals and 13 assists. There's so much to like with Saka, and he's also in good form now with 3 goals and 1 assist in his last 4 games. So Saka for me is maybe not essential, but he's the best Arsenal attacker, period. I know Gabriel Jesus has a good Champions League record, but I'd rather go for Saka, and he has been getting into some good goal scoring positions in recent games. He scored a tap-in against Liverpool. He was right there to tuck it home, and even with the goal against Nottingham Forest, he got into a great position to have that 1v1 against Turner, and he buried it with his weaker foot. So Saka for me is a very good option, and he also hasn't blanked at the Emirates, and not only that, he's produced 3 double-digit hauls in that stadium. Away from home, you'd expect a bit better, and that's where he could improve, but he did pick up an injury against Lens in his first away game, and he also got an assist in that match. Against Sevilla, was quite ineffective, and against PSV, he didn't even play at all. So Saka will be a contender for the most UCL fantasy points in the midfield this season. It just depends how far Arsenal go in this competition, but Porto will be quite tough. I think it'll be a bit tougher than people expect, and they might even win the game in Matchday 7, but going into the Emirates in Matchday 8, that's where you'd expect Arsenal to convincingly win and progress to the quarterfinals. But let's wait and see. Knockout football is full of surprises. Let's complete this team with the 3 forwards, and I've made another change in this position with one of the best players in the world. You could say that about any of my forwards, to be fair, but Harry Kane has been tremendous. He's actually matching Lewandowski in his record-breaking season for Bayern Munich with 24 goals in his first 20 appearances, and Kane has 6 goals and 1 assist in his last 8 games across all competitions, and he also scored in the recent 3-1 win over Borussia Mönchengladbach. Let's see how he does against Bayer Leverkusen in that crucial game, but he's got 24 goals and 5 assists in 20 Bundesliga matches, and he's also got the best start ever for a Bayern Munich player in terms of goal scoring, matching Lewandowski, as I just mentioned. He has a template pick with 41% ownership, and he's priced at 10.1 million, but he's got 41 UCL fantasy points, 4 goals, 3 assists, 1 player of the match award, and he has the joint most goal contributions in the Champions League group stages alongside Saka and Bellingham. But next up is the best goal scorer in the world in Erling Haaland, who just came back from injury. He almost missed 2 months out, but he's back. He has looked a bit rusty. He came off the bench against Burnley, and he started against Brentford and picked up an assist with an XGI figure of exactly 1. So the underlying numbers are still very promising. He's got 14 goals and 5 assists in 17 Premier League games, and he's also got more goals than games played in the Champions League. His ownership is 50%. That's only going to increase now. And in terms of UCL fantasy points, he's got 37, 2 double-digit returns, 5 goals, 1 assist, 1 player of the match award, and even a goal from outside the box, which gives you an extra point. But the last forward, and one of the key changes from my previous drafts, is Kylian Mbappe. This is not locked in, but I have to say with Mbappe, he's been a bit underwhelming in this season's Champions League. But over the years, he is a player of the match award machine, and he can get you 9 points or above quite easily. He's facing Real Sociedad, and despite their recent defensive record, 4 clean sheets in the last 5 matches across all competitions, and also how well they did in the Champions League group stages, you would expect PSG to go through on paper and Mbappe to do very well. Even if PSG were to get knocked out, for example, Mbappe should get some goal contributions across both matches, and what that gives you is yet another home player in Matchday 7, and I've also got the likes of Zaire Emery and Sommer as well. But the rest of the players, so 12 out of the 15, will be away from home in Matchday 7. Is that a concern for you? Let me know down in the comment section below. But let's talk about the starting 11, talk about some intricacies of UCL Fantasy and the captaincy. Remember, you will have 4 opportunities for the captaincy. You'll only have 1 definitive captain, of course, so if you change the captain, you can't go back to your original choice, and you also can't change the captain to someone who has already played. And if you have any questions, let me know down in the comment section below, and also be sure to check out the How to Play UCL Fantasy guide, which is very crucial. But let's now head over to the lineup and talk about the captaincy. In goal, I would go for Ederson with a back 3 of Upamecano, Gvardiol and Kim Min-jae, a midfield 4 of Kimmich, Foden, Bellingham and Zaire Emery, and the front 3 is probably the best you can assemble with Kane, Mbappe and Haaland, and the bench is still quite strong with Sommer, Hummels, Saliba and Saka. And what you want to do is sort things out by date and make sure that those that play on the 20th or 21st are on your bench. everyone who plays on the 13th should be in your starting 11. That is, pretty crystal clear. You don't want to go against that, otherwise you miss out on the chance of getting their points. And the way it works is, let's say, for example, those on the 13th, let's put Foden, for example, and Gvardiol, they blank. You can take them off and put the likes of Hummels and Saka into your starting 11 and optimize your chance of getting UCL Fantasy points. If you have anything that's unclear, be sure to let me know, and also to check out the How to Play UCL Fantasy video. And the captaincy also works in a similar way. So you can captain someone on the 13th of February. In this case, I'm going for Bellingham. Haaland is my backup. And on the 14th, I will change it to Kane if I'm not really too pleased with Bellingham's score. And I can do the same thing once again. If Kane underperforms in the following week, I can captain Hummels on the 20th of February. And if I'm not pleased with his score either, then Saka is my last chance and last saloon captain on the 21st of February on the Wednesday. So hopefully that's all clear. My 4 captaincy choices right now are Bellingham, Kane, Hummels and Saka. But I'm also considering the likes of Haaland on the 13th and Mbappe on the 14th to go for something a little bit different and maybe a lower owned captain, so to speak. But it's also worth mentioning with Mbappe, and the reason why I've brought him in, despite Real Sociedad being quite solid defensively, Mbappe in the last 9 matches has 12 goals and 5 assists, and he's on penalties. There's so much to like with him. 20 goals and 4 assists in 18 Ligue 1 starts. There's so much to like with him, and that's why he has come in to my squad. It's not definitive, it's not final. Over the weekend some injuries might happen, or certain players might be rotation risks, and that will impact my final team selection and also what you see on the deadline stream. But make sure to smash the like button of this video, so there will be a deadline stream next Tuesday. Even though I'm on holiday, the plan is still to get some content out for you, not just for UCL Fantasy but also for FPL. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's try to get this video to the 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 23k subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon, Championships Discord server, and the UCL Fantasy League. All of that is there. I wish you all the best of luck for Matchday 7 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.